Hello, everybody. This is Heidi Gluck from KEA Advisors. We have Bennett Whitnell on the line to present to you about closing out your used truck department for the end of the year. I just want to give a quick disclaimer that the information we're providing here is the opinion of KEA Advisors. It's not intended to be legal, accounting, or financial advice. So please consult your accounting and tax professionals as you plan for your year-end close. Also, I'll let you know that there is a questions box in this webinar platform. If you have a question at any time, just type it in and I will relay it to Bennett. So we'll look for about 25 minutes and let you get on with your day. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, Bennett.
Hi, Heidi. Thank you for that introduction there. And I see we've got a good number of attendees on the line here as well. So I want to appreciate everybody taking just a minute out of their day to have a little bit of a conversation on used trucks. I hope the information that we put forward is going to be interesting, is going to be relevant for you, is going to give you some food for thought as we walk in towards the end of the year here and we start to think about Q4. And some of what we're going to talk about is also getting ready for Q1 of 2020. So like Heidi said, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A here at the end of the session. If anything pops up that you want clarification on, feel free to shoot her a message and we can pause and have a conversation on that.
So lastly, Bennett, I just want to tell everybody that we will have this deck and the recording of the webinar available after this is over.
Excellent. We will have a deck and a recording of the webinar available to everybody. So with that in mind, here we go. For those of you that have been doing work with me in the past or have been reading the information that we put out in a while, you are going to know that I am a big fan of tackling problems in 3 phases. So it will surprise none of you to find that when I think about how I would get my department ready for the end of the year, I've got 3 big steps that I would want to make sure that I have tackled before the calendar turns over into next year. The first is we're going to take a physical inventory. The second is we're going to reassess our investment positions. And then the third is a bit of a higher-minded exercise, but we would invite you to take the opportunity to reassess your strategic position. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as we move into it. But one of the things that we find is that a lot of times used truck departments are so caught up in their day-to-day, and we stay really focused on what am I doing and how am I doing, and we never really spend a lot of time asking ourselves, whether it's as a used truck manager or as the dealer principal, why am I doing? And so we'll have some conversation on that as we move forward and we move through it. So when we talk about taking a physical inventory, one of the things that has surprised me as we spent more and more time here in KEA Advisors is how much time is spent by other parts of the dealership and making sure that we know what we have and where we have it, particularly when it comes to parts. Parts are inventoried often. If you're doing cycle counts effectively and efficiently, you're essentially taking inventory of your parts inventory all the time. I would challenge you to think about how often you verify the trucks that you have in your inventory and how often you verify that those trucks are actually on the lot with comparison to how often your parts department thinks about their physical inventory. How many parts do we have? Do we know where they are? And I want to do, to sort of drive this point home, a case study that we did in the spring of this year as John was engaging with a dealership at taking over running their used truck department for a little bit while they were looking for someone to replace their previous employee. Now, some of this is going to look a little bit severe, and you may get some ideas as we're looking at this as to why this dealership was looking for new leadership here, but it does throw into pretty stark relief the point of what we're talking about here. So John had taken over for this customer, and they've got 4 locations, and they had 56 trucks that they thought were in inventory spread out between those 4 locations. So we started off with a list of 56 trucks, and as we were going through and we started this physical inventory, we discovered that 3 of these trucks were missing, that they had grown legs and walked off the lot, and no one was entirely sure what happened to them. Two of the trucks were on the lot, but not on the books. So they had been purchased at some point or were part of a transaction somewhere along the line. We had the keys for these trucks. We knew where they were, but they weren't in the accounting system. We had one truck that had been on the lot so long and was so far in the back and so far out of the way that there was a tree that had grown up through the engine block. So we had to cut the tree down before we moved that truck off to the dump. And then we had 18 trucks that were not advertised for sale. So we had trucks to sell, but the market didn't know that they were available to be bought. And we had 0 trucks that were accurately recorded in the business system. So as they had received these trucks into inventory, the process for acknowledging them in the asset management portion of the business system, which is admittedly deficient to begin with, had never happened at all. So we had some basic VIN information, we had some of that other stuff, but we didn't take care of them from a standpoint of recording anything worth knowing about these trucks within the system. So we had to start, before we could go start looking at anywhere else and running the business, we had to make sure that we had a full understanding of what we had. And what we found out pretty quickly was that nobody really had any idea of what we had to work with in terms of inventory. Again, this is a bit of an extreme situation, but for you dealers that have multiple locations and wide footprints, I think you'd probably be pretty surprised if you actually sat down and went through the trucks that you were really in possession of, how often you don't own what you think you own. So we talked about what we're supposed to do. How should we do it? And this process can get very involved, but we don't necessarily advocate that this has to be sort of a soup to nuts, fine tooth comb situation. But really, at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you have the trucks that you think you have on the lot. So from our standpoint, a base physical inventory has a couple steps to it. One, we've got to verify the possession and location of the vehicle. Two, we've got to verify components, miles, and engine hours that match your inventory data. If you've got a customer who is looking to purchase a 670 from you that they think has a D13 in it, and it turns out that it's got an ISX, you're going to have an interesting conversation with that customer when it comes to actually show them the unit and deliver it. Or if you've got a D13 that you think has got an I-shift in it and it's got a 910 speed transmission instead, that customer is going to be pretty upset when they find out that what they're buying, what was represented to them, was not actually what you had to sell. So you need to make sure that what you have on the lot is what you think you have on the lot. It's got to be in good working condition, right? Especially if it's been sitting here for a while. We got to make sure that it turns on and turns over. We got to make sure that it can make it through a lap or two around the lot without issue. And really, that's something you should be doing in any case to help fend off lot rot for as well as you can. But we got to make sure that every truck that we've got available to sell is in a sellable condition. We got to make sure that units are available for sale both internally and externally. So if this has gone through the shop and we know that this is ready to sell, we've got to make sure that it's marked in our system, and we've got to make sure that it's loaded up into our marketing resources, and that someone who's searching for us on the internet, which is where a lot of our customers are searching for used trucks these days, a lot of your customers are searching for used trucks these days, I should say, that they can find it, that they know it's available for sale, and that you've got your passive means of gaining customers presenting the best picture to the marketplace that it can. And then the last thing is we've got to make sure that as well as your business system can account for whole goods and for physical inventory, it has that information available to it. So when someone's doing some internal searches or someone from the accounting team is looking, that we know what we have, and when we think about what we've got in this truck, that our conversations and our comparisons on that point are accurate as much as our business system allows. One best practice that we have seen that we think is effective, and we would advise that you take into account as well, is you really should be doing, particularly for dealerships that have more than 2 or 3 locations, is that you should be doing a cycle count on your used truck inventory at least once a quarter, but probably once a month. And you cycle count your used truck inventory just like you'd cycle count your parts inventory. That we've got 10% of our trucks that we're going to verify over the course of each month. and having that sample size. It's not going to be a perfect analog quite like your parts is, because parts usually it's going to be the same categories, just different stuff. But for the most part, if you are checking 10% of your inventory once a month and you aren't seeing any problems, you're probably going to be okay. You might miss a couple trucks, and you're still going to have an opportunity to do a full physical inventory at the end of the year. But this should be an ongoing conversation that you're having with your managers, that you're having with your inventory, for lack of a better term, to make sure that you have what you think you have and it's all in good working condition, and that you don't have any time bombs floating around. Probably landmines is a better word for it than time bombs, but you're not going to step on something and find a problem later on down the road. So that's step one, is we got to take a physical inventory. Step two is we have to reassess our investment position. So one of my favorite football coaches is Pete Carroll. And one of the things that Pete Carroll made famous during his coaching times at USC was an opportunity to review film with the team. And it was an exercise that they called Tell the Truth Monday. And so you are going to have an opportunity to watch film with the team, call out where you made mistakes, own those mistakes, and talk about what you're going to be doing over the course of the next week to correct that mistake and make sure that you didn't make the same mistake again in the coming week. We've got bolded and highlighted here because it's a piece that we really want to make sure that business leaders understand when we think about doing this exercise, is that mistakes happen. And the crime is not in making the mistake, but the crime is in ignoring the mistake and then putting ourselves in a position to make the same mistake again. So when we think about this exercise and reassessing our investment position, our contention is that you need to be constantly reassessing your investment position all the time against available market data. We recognize that for a lot of you, you're running really short staffs and you're running really lean operations. That might not be super feasible. And so when we think about this, what we want to do is we want to focus on trucks that are potentially a problem, right? If we're buying and selling a truck in the same market, if we've moved a truck under 90 days, or if we bought a truck within the last 90 days, unless something catastrophic has happened and we've got a disciplined, rigorous investment strategy, we're probably going to be okay. What we want you guys to look at down the stretch here and in the course of the last 3 months of the year is on units that are older than 90 to 120 days old. Our experience is by the time we get here, if the truck hasn't moved yet, somewhere along the line, something happened and this truck is unlikely to move profitably in the future. Anecdotally, it happens all the time that we're holding on to a truck for a long time. Some rich idiot shows up at day 375 and makes us whole on a unit because it just really wanted that one. That doesn't happen very often. That's not a plan that we'd advocate for you. So what we want you to do is we want you to look at units that are 90 to 120 days old, sit down with the manager responsible for the unit that fits into that aging criteria. If you're a dealer principal with one used truck manager, it's just sitting down with the used truck manager. If you are a vice president or somebody who has used truck managers that report to them, then we'd recommend you look at this on sort of a manager by manager basis and figure out who's responsible for the trucks that you have that fit into that aging criteria, and so to borrow a football phrase, watch the film with that person. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the unit's book value against asking prices, against the verified sales observations where those are available, and against current auction values to help understand what's the ceiling for this truck, what's the best case scenario, and what's the auction value, what's the worst case scenario for this truck. And the question we'd encourage you to ask yourself today is, if I were to buy this truck today, what should I put in it? And when you've got that information in front of you, then you've got an opportunity to make a decision, right? We're either going to write down that truck and we're going to remarket the unit as if we just bought it today for the price that we would put into it today. And we're going to write down to that point. We're going to operate from there moving forward, or we're going to liquidate the asset. We're going to take our beating and we're going to move on. And I know that is a lot easier for me to say, as I'm not responsible for any of your P&Ls. But there comes a point where we need to admit that we've lost and it's time to move on, and we just need to take what we can get. We can lose $15,000 on this unit today, or we can wait and we can lose $25,000 on this unit next year. Take your pick. So to give you an example of what that looks like, here is a situation where this was a unit we discussed with a client that's part of our comprehensive used truck business intelligence just last week. So what we've got here is a 2013 7600 with a 10-speed transmission. This is a vocational truck, so this is heavy haul. Oopsies, let me jump back here. And what we did was we asked ourselves the same series of questions, right? What is the market for this unit? How many units that look like this are for sale? The short answer to that is there's not many units that look like this for sale. That could be a good thing or that could be a bad thing. We're not sure, right? This could be a hot piece of inventory that not a lot of people have, or this could be an inventory that nobody else wants, so no other dealer has purchased. Next question is, what are the comps for this unit? How many units that look like this have sold? Our database has 3 units that look like this and sold in the last 90 days. The average retail price was $40,000. So these trucks are moving, but when you look at our investment levels in this truck, they aren't moving at a level that looks feasible for the $59,000 that we have in this truck. So then the following question is, okay, well, what does the auction market for this unit look like? And the auction market for this unit is relatively weak, right? The auction comp values for this unit came across the line at $28,000. So from our standpoint, our best case scenario is $40,000. Worst case scenario right now is somewhere around the $27,000. So the question is, what should we do? Well, it's pretty clear to us that this unit is a dud. Nope, not many people have inventory looks like this, and it's not because the market is hot and these things are flying off the shelves. We are way over invested in this unit and we're way underaged. We would suggest that this unit needs to be liquidated and the loss recognized. The customer decided that we're going to take a write down on this and we're going to try and remarket it, which is their prerogative, obviously. But either way you slice it, keeping this on the books at $59,000 is not a realistic solution for us to have this problem taken care of by the end of the year. And these are the kind of conversations that we would advocate you have for all of the trucks on your lot that are over 120 days old. So the last piece we've got, and probably the most complicated piece here, is you need to reassess your strategic position. So if you've been at a presentation that John has done on used trucks, I'm positive you've seen either this slide or a slide that looks a lot like this. But this is John Whitnell's sort of strategic continuum of strategic options for your used truck department. I like this slide a lot, but there is a thing in here that I don't like. And that's because this year-end activity isn't considering so much how our department goes about accomplishing our mission, but what that mission even is. Used trucks, when you think about it, has a really unique role in your dealership and all dealerships. And we're going to talk about why it's unique here on the next slide. But a couple of questions for you to ask yourself here is, when we go over those conversations, have you decided what the role of your used truck department is going to be in your dealership? Have you told the leader of this business what accomplishing their mission looks like? And have you figured out what accomplishing that mission means to your business? So what does that mean? Well, our parts department is here to buy and sell parts. Our service department is here to profitably fix equipment and get it back on the road. And our new truck sales department is here to populate the markets and probably sell some financial products to go along with it, while also generating at least a little bit of margin. But your used truck department doesn't need to do any one thing to be successful for the dealership, except for the job that you've got carved out for it. So some used truck departments are here to support the sale of new equipment. Some used departments are used to keep a backlog of reconditioning work to make sure that the tech stays busy when the shop slows down. Some are there to generate long-term relationships for parts and service department with local customers. And some used truck departments are there to operate as a standalone business and generate a profit on the sale of used equipment. Those might sound intuitive, and sometimes they might even sound like the same thing, but they aren't. And they sound like they're all working towards the same goal, but they might not be, right? Particularly when we talk about the department as an opportunity to generate profit on the sale of used equipment. Used truck department might be a loss leader for us, and that's okay. if we've got a plan for how we're going to make up for that loss other places, and we've still made sure that the used truck department is staying within the parameters that we've set for them to make up for it in other areas. So, all of these things can help your dealership generate more profit. Some have more risks, some have different considerations than others. But whatever you choose, it needs to be chosen. And however you act based on that choice needs to be on purpose. And the conversations that you have as a result of those choices are going to change. And if you haven't had that kind of conversation with your business leader, that would be one thing that we'd advocate that you do here as you move into the fourth quarter to set yourself up for the success here in 2020. So I ran a little bit long here. I was supposed to have 15 minutes and I came in here at 20 minutes. So we've got some opportunity for questions. I don't have a question screen in here. So I am going to scroll back here to this picture because I think this picture is funny. And any opportunity that you guys have for a question, or we've got about 5 minutes for Q&A here. Let's open up
Bennett,
the line.
I don't see any questions coming in. I'm watching. One thing that we were asking on the other webinars is, what's an example of a dealership you've worked with who does this really successfully?
Well,
without naming names, of course, but what have you seen, and what has that done for their profitability?
Sure. So I will come back and focus on the dealership that John's working with right now in terms of how this can have success on a sort of an individual dealership basis. When you think about the liability that shows up when you've got 3 trucks missing on the books, right? Just the idea of understanding that we've got, these 3 trucks that were missing represented about $75,000 worth of assets that we thought we had on the books right now that we didn't, right? And so when you think about what that $75,000 means, it's a problem in a bunch of different directions, but what it ultimately means is that this dealership is now generating 17% gross margin. When you take away 17% gross margin from that $75,000 investment, off the top of my head, right, that's about an $11,000 hit that we took right there. And so when you think about shedding some of these other risks, these other liabilities, I'll scroll back here to this specific example that we talked about last week. The question sometimes isn't necessarily, does this generate profit right now? Am I going to make money based on this activity, right? Writing down this unit and putting ourselves in a position to take our beating and get out of it the best way we know how is going to cost us about $25,000 right now. If we didn't do this, if we didn't take these actions and put ourselves in a position to move forward on purpose, this same activity 6 months from now is probably going to cost us $35,000. Might cost us $40,000 depending on what the market does. And so, when I think about the profitability of this exercise, losing today is never very fun. But when you think about what that loss is going to be 6 months from now, it's going to be twice as not fun as it is now. So when I think about this exercise, I think about not necessarily always the profitability from the action, but in reality, if you don't lose $25,000 that you could have lost 6 months from now, from a bottom line standpoint, there is no difference between making $25,000 and not losing $25,000, which isn't very sexy, and it's not very much fun to think about profitability in terms of not losing, but I don't know if there's a better way to think about it in terms of playing the kind of catch-up that we're talking about here at the end of the year. Did that answer your question, Heidi?
Yes, it does. Thanks. I don't see any other questions here from the group. So Bennett, if you want to finish up and give us any closing thoughts.
Well, we've got, so Heidi is going to be sending out a recording for this here, and also I believe the deck that goes along with it. I will put my contact information in the deck, and I'll put John's contact information as well. If you want to have a 15-minute conversation with us on what this might look like, just in terms of organizing some of your thoughts for the close of the year, we'd invite you guys to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to provide that sort of 15-minute quick guidance for free. And if there's some opportunity for us to help you in that in a bigger way moving forward, we would certainly welcome that conversation as well.
Absolutely. And as always, info@keaadvisors.com is the email address if you have any other kinds of questions that aren't directed towards anybody in particular. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time here today. Again, I know everybody's busy, so we appreciate you carving out this time in your schedule and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Goodbye.